Hey, hello everyone, and welcome to the next Neuron Talks episode. Today, it is my pleasure to host Richard Waltman, who is a full stack engineer at OpenBCI, which is a company you may well know. As always, feel free to ask questions in the comments, and thank you for being here, Richard, and the floor is yours.
Let me go back a little bit. Yeah, these are my professional interests, music and having computers that can think and feel a little bit, maybe in hopes of making the computers more empathetic. And maybe if we can make computers more empathetic, maybe we can get more empathetic people. Who knows? There's a lot of ways to get that done. Of course, my hobbies, I have a family with a loving wife and son. I play golf, I coach in soccer, and I love trying new things. So we're going to go over the basics of BCIs and their integration with spatial computing. We're going to see what are the challenges that make this difficult to achieve, and how is this applied in our daily and research lives. Oh, yeah, some of us have research lives, daily lives and research. And then bonus points if we can compare and contrast modalities based on intent. And then we're going to have some questions at the end. Let's get into it. Here we go. For a brief background, I'm not going to spend all day on this. I hope many of you, if you have questions on this, you can just Google it right now. Any of these terms that you see on your screen. We have two main categories of brain-computer interfaces. They're also called brain-machine interfaces, maybe a few other terms out there. But for today, we're just going to stick with the term BCI. We have invasive BCIs, and these are neural implants. You're going to need to have a surgeon or a robot surgeon in some cases that cuts a hole in your skull, and they're going to implant a device into your brain. This gets the internet totally worked up. and it's not really as scary as it sounds, because we're doing this type of procedure for people that have a huge deficit in life. We're also going to get into that with applications. But we're talking about implanting a chip in somebody's brain to help them move their arm so they can hug their loved ones. We're not talking about mind control or any of that at this point. That's not while that could happen for people that abuse this, that's not what's happening in today's age. And then, of course, we have non-invasive BCIs, EEG-based systems, things that you can put on and take off at your leisure. So right here, I have, many of you may have heard about Galia. Sorry, it's been on my desk for a little while as I'm working on it. Here we go. And see, here's a VR headset in the front. You have a bunch of EEG sensors in the back. We have a bunch of face sensors in the front. And I can totally put this on and take it off. And I'm just going to show you that right now. And just to show you how long it takes. And then I got a little squeezy thing on the back. And then I would put this ear clip on. And I put this ear clip on. And then just shake or wiggle this a little bit. And it's on. And now I'd like to not be connected to the computer. I'll do that, do this, and I'm no longer connected to the computer. It's that simple. Invasive BCIs have some issues where computer chips aren't really meant to be inside of the brain, and so the body can attack it or degrade the materials, and that's a huge challenge for invasive. But at the same time, you're getting better quality signals when you go through the scalp. With non-invasive BCIs, there's one really good analogy I heard on a video, which is like, if you've ever been to a sporting event, or maybe you never made it inside the stadium of a sporting event, but you were walking past it, and one of the teams score. You know that something happened inside the stadium, but you're not sure which team scored. You didn't see it. And that's what it's like for non-invasive, is that we have a huge hunch when an event-related potential happens. We can see it, but it requires a lot more work to know where exactly in the brain that electrical impulse, that action potential happened. Do we know the exact neuron where it fired from? You know, and so that brings us to our next point: neuroscience fundamentals. There are things in the brain called neurons. They do a thing called action potentials, which I believe involves like potassium or something. It's been a long time since I've talked about it. This is a great point for you to look up on your own right now if you're more interested in it. I'm not going to spend a bunch of time on it, but it does generate a small amount of electricity in the order of microvolts. And they do this in such a way that it creates waves. And as you can see in the picture, I have just some synthetic sine waves generated by the OpenBCI GUI. We have a 5 hertz wave on channel 1, if you can see that. Let's see if I can annotate this here. Here's channel 1. We have a 5 hertz wave, and then it goes into something called FFT, fast Fourier transform. It's amazing. And we can see that on the x-axis, we have frequency, and on the y-axis, we have amplitude. And there, right here, is our 5 hertz wave. And this is if you want to learn more about FFT and the math behind it, feel free to Google it. But then we go one step further in EEG signal processing, and we have a concept called band powers. And this is divided into delta, theta, alpha, beta, and gamma. And with delta being, it's really hard to see here, but 0 to 4 hertz, and I think 4 to 8 hertz, and it keeps going up. But this gets put into the theta bin right here. So, and likely, let's see, this one right here, 30 would go either in beta or gamma. So cool. See if we can clear all. But what's the full pipeline on getting this data? How does it get into the computer? Well, you're going to have to connect some electrodes to somebody's scalp externally. You're going to need to get the hair out of the way. You need good contact. You need what's called low impedance, which is measured in ohms, maybe kilo ohms in some cases. But we're not going to get into all those details right now. But you're going to need to connect electrodes to a user. Then you're going to need to connect those electrodes to an amplifier, which is going to ramp up, make the signals a little bit louder so that we can actually read them. And the heart of at least our OpenBCI hardware is this chip right here. It's the Texas Instruments ADS 1299, which is an 8-channel bio amplifier. And then from there, this needs to communicate with software to do signal processing and filtering and feature extraction. This means that we're going to be applying something like band pass filters, band stop filters. The main thing you're going to want to do is there is electrical wiring in pretty much every building. We don't live out in the wilderness, especially if you're doing EEG research. Some people do. You'd be surprised. And they make an off-the-grid rig that has a battery and they can walk out in nature. But for the rest of us, there is a current that comes through the electrical grid, and depending on where you live, it's either 50 hertz or 60 hertz, and we're going to want to use a filter to remove that the strength of that 50 and 60 hertz signal. And then after that, you're going to want to go into classification and training, which gets into like Python, TensorFlow, or MATLAB, whatever your research tool of choice is, to let's go back a little bit. Let's say if you have a hunch and you have a hypothesis that when beta waves are high, the user is doing an activity. This is not a real world example. It's just something I'm making up right now. And then you would want to train your model that that reinforces that when beta waves are high, I want my metric to be 1. And that's this step right here. I'm not going to go into that. I could spend an entire talk on just one of these steps. So maybe we should move on. And then I didn't have room for a 5th image. But then after you've classified and you said, okay, my user is focusing when their alpha waves are high, and I want a light to light up. And then you would have to have some type of software code that would, while running the model, control the external device. Let me clear my screen again. So the key technical challenges for doing all of what was shown on the previous slide is that there's going to be noise. We already described one type of noise, which is mains noise. But these are some pictures I took today. I got my Cycon board. I didn't hook it up to anything. And I just put my fingers on the pins right here that would normally be connected to an electrode. And I touch them, and you can just see all of these squiggly lines in the image on the bottom left. But what happens if it's connected to my head and then I scratch my head in the middle of a recording? And we have like a researcher that's, spending hundreds of hours on this study. Well, they're going to have to find some way to remove motion artifacts from just moving your head, moving the cap. Also, there's another type of interference that happens when you use the positions of FP1 and FP2, which are right here respectively, and you blink your eyes. If everybody can just do this right now, just put your hands in those spots and then move your eyes. And just the skin, apart from the muscles that come off of the top of the eyes and go across the top of the head, there's actual electrical muscle interference. And then apart from that, there's like the skin moving itself. And it's tough, I'm not gonna lie. And then you also want a low signal to noise ratio. One of the ways Dahlia achieves a lower signal to noise ratio is a thing called active electrodes. If I were to just get a gold cup electrode and I pull it to the Cycon and then I connect it right here, it's just a piece of gold and a wire, right? But an active electrode pumps a little bit of signal to a circuit board that's really close. So there's like contact with the skin and there's a circuit board on the other side. And then we amplify the signal just a little bit closer to the device before we run it through a cable. And this lowers the noise, believe it or not. It's a great strategy. So Dahlia actually has a bunch of active electrodes on the back that we designed ourselves. Hats off to our EE team. And apart from that, you want low latency. What does it matter if you collect the signals using this bioamplifier and it takes 20 seconds to get from here to the computer? Like, you want to control things. You want to know what's happening now. I mean, some researchers, when they're doing like the off-the-grid studies, we can store data to SD card, which we're working on a fix for that currently. But yeah, there's latency every time you have to transmit from one piece of hardware to another piece of software to another piece of software. It takes time, and everybody wants everything as quickly as possible, and that is definitely a barrier to getting everything working smoothly. So what are the applications of BCIs? This again can be split into medical and non-medical. We have neuroprosthetics, controlling artificial limbs. Somebody that's lost their arm, maybe from about this point right here, if you can just put your hand up in the air like I'm doing, and then hold your hand right here, and then flex, you can still see that our fingers are actually controlled by muscles that extend through the arm. We can then put a prosthetic on them that connects at this point, and put EMG, electromyography sensors, around here. Let me go ahead and silence my pause all notifications. Okay, there we go. It's still the middle of a workday for us at OpenBCI, so I'm going to have to pause my notifications while I speak with you fine people. Anyways, neuroprosthetics. We get a prosthetic, we put it right here, and there's even people that have pulled this off without electronics. Like, they put a mechanical thing right here that moves just enough, and then through mechanics, like, they can grasp a hand without any electronics. But you could also put EMG sensors there, a little circuit board here, and so that whenever this muscle is flexed, I think you can kind of see that right here. And that when this muscle is flexed, the hand claps, and now they can pick something up. They can, hug a loved one. They can pick up their drink and drink it. And there's a term that I put towards the end, and I'll go ahead and share it now. The term is neuroplasticity. Controlling an artificial limb with your muscles, that while it's similar to what you were doing before, it's just not the same. There's also this term called like a phantom limb. Even when people lose something, they still feel it in a way that's hard to describe. But our brains are amazing, and they find a way to overcome this. If the brain needs to rewire itself because you really want to, hold a drink yourself and, drink something by yourself, that motivation, it drives us to rewire our brains in a way to make it happen. It's just truly fascinating. And this goes like with stroke recovery. Look at that man in the picture. He wants to walk. He doesn't want to be in that chair. And if we can get, and this leads people to say, yes, I do want a chip in my brain. I want to walk again. And they can even put like robotic legs on the like an exoskeleton on the bottom of his legs. I've seen the videos of this. And then they can put an implant inside, like near the motor cortex, near the area that controls the legs. And then over time, he thinks about wanting to move his legs. The muscle signals are not making it down the spine at all. They're coming out of the implant. And then the implant goes into software, and that controls the exoskeleton to help this man walk. And these things are happening now. It's not just the future. It's happening in research labs now. And then also for people, not just about motor movement, not just about the motor cortex of the brain. People want to talk. If they're locked in and maybe it's not possible for them to move, if we have locked in individuals and they have real thoughts, if they can say yes or no to just their loved ones, that unlocks an entire world. That unlocks a human being that's in there. And it's just a beautiful thing to see that that's possible with implants. And so if anybody in the world wants to say that implants are bad, they need to go look up some of these success stories. They are really happening. They are changing lives. And then we have fun stuff, non-medical applications. Using Galia to control a Unity video game. We have like 5 or 6 video games that we've made at OpenBCI internally that we just show people at conferences. I need to be working on one of those right now, in fact. The intro demo that helps everybody get started. And then there's a lot of people interested in like flight simulators. We have quite a few flight simulator companies that are working with Galia, and they need to improve the training of their pilots. They have a budget for the Galia system, and they cannot have their pilots, who knows, falling asleep while they're piloting. I don't think anybody wants that. But what can we do, and how can we measure what they're doing in the flight sim to make our pilots better? It's performance enhancement. That's even happening with EEG systems. There's in the NeuroTech community, there's one guy who was making an EEG system and selling it to esports teams. High performing esports athletes and they want to get better, and they want to know how they feel and what's happening with their brainwaves. And then I'm not going to talk on this much, but people could want to hack neuro devices and put devices on people to see if they're lying or not. This is another thing that gets the internet all worked up. It's a huge ethics discussion. But then apart from that, we're also seeing interest from defense and intelligence communities that I'm not going to go into which ones in particular, but I believe that they're interested in things that the rest of us don't quite understand. And it's not just about doing a polygraph on somebody to see if they're lying while you're interrogating somebody. It's deeper than that. Like information warfare, maybe. Like I said, I'm just making this up right now. Like, let's say there's some people that believe that maybe TikTok is information warfare, and certain countries flood content platforms with a way to influence populations. In our defense, industries and contractors and all that, they want to combat that. And how can we make our public more resilient to information warfare? Things like that. Cool. Now let's go to the other side of the street. Spatial computing. Well, we are 3D users naturally. And what spatial computing does is combine the physical world and the digital world. We have terms like extended reality, augmented reality, virtual reality, mixed reality. I may not spend a bunch of time defining those terms. You can look them up right now if you wish. VR, or I can get VR is, there's definitely no pass-through. I put on my Vario, oh, come on now. I put on my Vario headset. It doesn't have any cameras in the front. So when I put this on, I see black right now. And if I turn it on and I fire up a game or a demo, I see only that. And then there's other models which have cameras on the front, which are meant to, they need two because you're going to need depth perception because we have two eyes. And we can see the outside world, and it starts to mix or augment the outside world with the inside world and all that good stuff. I'm probably butchering my words right now. And for a free example and this is accessible now. There's a game that I started playing called Pokemon Go. Quite a few games like this. You can see somebody's here on the grass, and they point their camera up, and it adds a digital Pikachu. And it's so fun. It's free to play. This is not a plug for Pokemon Go. I'm just saying that it's a free XR option that anybody can do right now. What's not so free is a self-driving car. And here we see that the car has to map out all of these different things. And even in the image itself, it's hard for us to pay attention to this. But when we run a stop sign and there's a police officer there, we sure wish we had seen it, right? But computers just, what are you going to do? Who are you going to give a ticket to? Do you give the ticket to the user, or do you give it to Tesla? Who knows? But they just don't have that type of leeway, and it's a very hard problem. And they use things like depth sensors, inertial measurement units, and then SLAM, which is like localization and mapping. And what's interesting is companies like Tesla are moving away from LiDAR, which uses lasers to do like a point cloud thing or something like that. And they're doing it just with cameras because they're, what is it called? Computer vision. Their computer vision is just that good, and they believe in it. But we've actually been researching this since the 90s. I've read the research papers with General Motors, did a collaboration with like Department of Transportation for the US. And they've just been packing cars with sensors for like 40 years. And that's how we get to where we are today. Cool. So Spatial computing enhances human computer interaction. We live, love, and learn in a spatial world. This is how we were created to interact with our environment. Spatial computing allows computers to begin to represent digital concepts with spatial context. And I'm going to make this claim here today. You can quote me on this. Hopefully it stands the test of time. But our brains are fundamentally wired to learn and perform at their best when considering spatial information. For the last 30 years, you can look at the image at the left. We have a bunch of individuals walking around a city with their cell phones out. And look at the man in the red shirt and I think it looks like a woman maybe in the blue shirt with the green pants. And let's say that they're texting each other, literally talking to each other. This happens all the time in rooms at parties. People are still texting even though they're in the same room. Don't ask me why. And then the man on the left laughs. They are looking, they are sharing information. They are in the same place. And yet she doesn't know what he's laughing about. Is he laughing at the emoji that she just sent him? Or is he laughing at something else entirely? Maybe he's texting the lady behind him or something. We just don't know. There's so much information in both of their hands. Every person in this picture has so much information, but there's no context. And we don't know what's going on. It's not a shared experience. It's a shared experience in that they're all in the crosswalk, but it's not. The digital information that's present in this image, there's no context for it. And this is how we've lived the last 30 and 40 years. And it causes miscommunication, and it's cool. And it's a huge leap from where we were the previous 40 years. But now we have mixed reality headsets that are in consumer hands. We have Quest, we have Vario headsets that we're working with, and we have Apple Vision Pro, and people are buying these things. They're expensive, but they're buying them and they're using them. So look at the man on the right now, and he seems to be doing something at a desk. And let's go just one step further. Let's say we're in the kitchen. Pretend he's in a kitchen and two people are wearing mixed reality headsets. And I'm making one recipe in a pot on the stove. And I have my recipe displayed in one of these panels above the pot. And then I have someone else in the kitchen and they're cooking something in the oven. And their recipe is displayed above a separate oven that is maybe near mine or not near mine. And I'm cooking and I'm stirring the pot for my recipe. And do they really have to ask me, what are you doing? When they see me stirring a pot with my recipe hovering over the pot. The information is shared. They can both see it with their mixed reality headsets. And then maybe the step that I'm on is highlighted, or they can see the text even from like far away, or they look at it with their eyes and the eye tracking makes it larger so that they can see it. And it just happens naturally. I'm not saying all of this exists, but it could in a matter of days if somebody just develops it. And then so in that way, there's shared context of digital context because it's attached to the physical world. And when we start to have XR glasses that are even smaller than things like the Vision Pro and the Quest, this is going to get even more crazy. We're going to walk around, and when we see a shop and we see a dress or pants in the window, we just glance there, and if we don't have our ads turned off, we see those pants in ourselves. Like we see a representation ourselves with the pants. We can already do that through websites. If I want to go buy a, what do you call it? A bookshelf. You never really know if bookshelves are going to fit or how many books they're going to hold. But you fire up your phone. You say, does this bookshelf fit on my wall between my clothes and all this stuff? And you can see that. And in that way, there's digital content that you understand if there's a real world fit. for the digital content. And then you order it and it comes in your house and you put it together and voila, it fits. The tolerances probably aren't great, but it's going to be close and hopefully it does. So this is just a really profound step. I wanted to just slow down just a second right here and share that spatial computing by itself, whenever it starts getting deployed to everybody, we're going to understand each other more. It's not just about being cool or taking videos with Meta Ray-Ban glasses of people. When we're starting to display this digital content in a way like a Pikachu shows up, it's gonna change how we interact with our world and with each other. But more importantly, this is for the individual, apart from shared communication and stuff like that. This is how we were meant to learn. And how do I'm going to try to use some quotes now and some citations to back up why this is a thing. Our brains, here's the statement. Our brains are fundamentally wired to learn and perform at their best when considering spatial information. One of the key areas is the hippocampus. If we can see it in green right there on the image, it's very deep in the brain. I'm just going to read this out loud. The hippocampus is a key area for spatial learning and memory. The hippocampus helps animals create a spatial map of their environment. Place cells in the hippocampus fire when an animal is in a specific location. Damage to the hippocampus can make it difficult to learn navigation and goal locations. So is this just a guess that the hippocampus has to do with spatial map of how we perceive the world? No, this has been researched. We're quite sure of it. And here is a citation right here. I will share the slides with Dominica after this, so y'all can pull up these links. And the title of this paper is Space in the Brain, How the Hippocampal Formation Supports Spatial Cognition, Being Aware of Your Surroundings. And the hippocampus is important in human development. Hippocampal development commences within weeks of conception and continues through the first years of life in human infants. And you can see I found a cool graphic from one of these links that shows the development of a fetus into a small child, and then how that even plays out into the adult image. And by week 8 or 9 of human gestation, the hippocampus is distinguishable from other brain regions, marking the beginning of distinct hippocampal development. And in contrast, our prefrontal cortex, the area in the front of the brain, just right behind my forehead, that is still developing into our 20s, which is why, it's important to stay away from substances, substance abuse and things like that. People think, well, I'm 18, I can do whatever I want. And these individuals may not understand that their brain is still developing. We need to care for our brains. We need to drink plenty of water, eat good food, maybe avoid trampolines. That's more like the spinal. No, seriously, we do want to try and limit damage to our brain. But in the earliest stages, the hippocampus is forming as a deep structure within the brain, and it's the whole entire cortex. Cerebral cortex is built around this, and I think it even ends up passing information through to the cerebellum, which is responsible for automatic muscle movements. So when I say I want to raise my hand, I didn't have to think about all the different muscle groups. My cerebellum handles that for me, but the decision comes from the prefrontal cortex that I would like to mostly. Okay, thoughts. There's like neural pathways, which I'm not going to get into all that, but they really good studies. They take a map of somebody's brain and they see how if you have enough electrodes and maybe an fMRI scan, how a thought like traces through different areas of the brain and it bounces around through different spots. And what's crucial is that the hippocampus is so at the middle because things need to connect through it so often. If you take out somebody's hippocampus, you're not going to understand even that your hand is down or up or something like that. It's crazy. It's very important. So that's how I backed up my claim that our brains are fundamentally wired to learn and perform at their best when considering spatial information. Cool. Let's put them together. The intersection of BCIs and spatial computing. You can control AR and VR systems with your brain. When the alpha band power is high, change the color of the room. Play a sound. I wrote code and I wrote demos for OpenBCI that does exactly that. It was super easy. You just get the number, you pipe it through, and you change the color based on the number. Boom, you're done. And then we also need to combine what we get from our sensors with spatial data. So like IMUs, which is like tracks the position of 3D objects, moving your head like this, maybe do some motion artifact removal whenever you move your head. Probably that's a good way to do it. I think, what's that called? ICA is the term for motion artifact removal. And then you might want to measure cognitive load. This is where the flight training people come in. They're interested in cognitive load of their pilots and performance. And they're going to use BCIs to monitor user engagement and fatigue in immersive experiences. So let's say some example use cases. We have one demo internally that it's like hands-free VR navigation. We talked with one of our former employees, and he said that in the military, sometimes people, they're forced to read a manual. And if you're holding a book or an iPad, let's just say they need their manual is on their iPad, and they need to hold their iPad with one hand, or maybe they've got a stand, and then they need, or let's say they've got an iPad stand, and then they have to interact with the iPad this way, and then they only have one hand left to like hold a bolt and screw it in. They kind of need a third arm. So what you do there is, let's say they just do eye control, and then we also have EMG sensors around the cheeks. Let's say they're looking at a digital iPad in VR, and then using their eyes, optical eye tracking, they're scrolling the manual. They have both of their real hands, and let's say they have two VR controllers. They can put both of their hands on the object that they need to manipulate, and then they flex their cheek muscle like this, and they do it twice, and then like a drone comes in and picks up an extra part to drop into place while they're using their hands. This is augmenting our current abilities. And if it can be done in VR, I mean, it would only take, what, like 10 years of research to make a robot that can do it? Sorry, that's a joke. But it's the idea is there, right? It's cheaper to do it in VR. We can develop it, and if it plays out super well in VR, I'm sure somebody somewhere could find a way to make it real. And we also have like neurofeedback and spatial computing, like real-time control based on brain activity for immersive training. Our Galia Alpha program, this is kind of public knowledge at this point. We worked with Valve, which makes the popular gaming platform Steam, and they did a lot of amazing internal research using a very early Galia system. But even before they had that, there's this game called like Left 4 Dead, and we were told, or I don't know how I figured this out. Maybe somebody had to have told me that without any human interaction, whenever like your health got low from battling the zombies or whatever, whenever they perceived that the user was struggling, they would like add more zombies and make it worse. I mean, you'd be like, hey, if my health is low in the game, why don't you make it easier on me? But they can totally just throw it the other way, just because if a pilot is having a hard time focusing, and then you throw like 5 extra alarms on top of them, can they handle it? Right? And if they can, they've improved their performance past maybe what they thought was possible. And then we also have adaptive learning systems, which are like, yeah, that's I kind of moved into like the third system. The environment itself adjusts based on what the user is experiencing. And like with the Left 4 Dead example, that game is not connected to a brain-computer interface. They just kind of had a hunch based on like what the user movement was happening. But you can totally do it with brain-computer interfaces, especially if you have metrics for valence and arousal. If you want to look that up right now, or Google that, valence and arousal, that's towards emotion recognition. And once you have those on hand, the sky's the limit for how you'd like to control your XR environment. Looks like we're doing okay on time. But there are technical challenges and considerations when marrying these two. I think some people have even said that this is like deep tech at this point. The electrode setup is difficult. Look at the I think I believe it's the little girl on the top image. Look how many wires are coming out of her head. And then we have what looks like a lady or something on the bottom right. And this is a clinical EEG. Looks like, I don't know, I don't feel like counting them, like 32 or more channels. And that's just what's plugged into the machine. And who wants to carry this around all day, you know, in real life? Then if you're going to carry it around, then you have to consider battery life, and the bigger computer you put with it, the bigger battery you need, and the heavier it gets. And now it just starts to snowball. We've only done 2 points on technical challenges, and it's already like, well, how am I going to have that with my AR glasses, and how is that going to fit on my face? And then how much battery life is it going to have? And I really have to charge this 3 times a day? It's hard work. As they say, hardware is hard. Software is soft. No. Software is also a little bit hard too. But the saying is that hardware is hard. And then we need to do signal processing in the 3D space. You need to have real-time motion artifact removal from like EOG and EMG and maybe an IMU using something like ICA. I know I just said a bunch of letter analogies, but it's the best I could do. It's so many big words in this space. And then you may need to do some type of like dynamic recalibration. We're after that at OpenBCI. It looks like Meta with they acquired something quite a while ago. You may have seen it in the announcement. It's based out of something called Control Labs. They have this risk-based EMG thing that it looks like it's gonna see the light of day with their Orion prototype. And it kind of, if you don't move your hand and then you do a small movement, but you're going to have to calibrate it. You have to know what's the strongest muscle flex. Ooh, I even have this little thing. I use this whenever I'm doing EMG studies and I put electrodes on my forearm, get my little OpenBCI brain. But you need to know what's the maximum and then what's the minimum. And then you need to recalibrate this often based on what the user is doing. And that involves a little bit of machine learning. And yeah, I'm gonna just leave it at that. So they're doing some type of dynamic calibration in real time based on user. Because what are you gonna do? Are you gonna like remember your maximum and minimum for the lifetime of wearing it on? Do you calibrate it just when you put it on and tell them to squeeze real tight and then let go? Or do you need to recalibrate every few minutes? It's a tricky situation. And then there's some ethical and privacy concerns. Who owns the data? Like currently with Quest, I think everybody is required to have a Facebook login. And in that way, people are kind of locked into that system. It's not so easy to hop around. That's one reason why we work with Vario. They work well with Department of Defense clients, and they just sell you the device. They sell you a license to use the software, and then you're off to do the races for yourself, and you're not really concerned with any of your data. Just like at OpenBCI, for the longest time, the company is not concerned with gathering people's data. Let people store it on their machines however they like. We are just happy to support them with hardware and software. That's one of the reasons I love to work for this company. We're not concerned with that. And then you need informed consent for like neuro rights. Some I'm not going to get into this, but some countries in some states are beginning to draft what are neuro rights. It's a thing, and you can go look that up if you like. And then there's also the ethics of controlling user attention and behavior. Like I said with the Left 4 Dead example, where maybe when the user's health is low in the game, you make it harder. But if you're doing some type of attention study, I mean, hopefully you have a good IRB, saying that it's allowed, but you can only do so much to people without making them upset and them maybe wanting to sue you, right? We can't just thrust people into what are they called? Like traumatizing experiences. And what if the mechanics of your software is wrong? What if you wanted to give them a calming experience and the system misconstrued the input because maybe there was an artifact in the system and it just made something scary for them instead of helping them calm down and they have PTSD? You have to get it right, especially like with PTSD. If you're trying to help a veteran or individual with PTSD, we want a reduction in symptoms of PTSD. We don't want to exacerbate that. So, future directions and emerging trends. We have a picture of Galia on the right. We're going to want to combine lots of sensors, which is exactly what Galia does. That's why we decided to do it. And we want wireless and wearable BCIs. Currently, Galia is wireless, and it's tethered to a computer so that only for the displays though. But I think there's a way you can get a strong enough laptop and put it in the backpack with a huge battery, and then let the laptop drive the display. That's what some places do. And then we're going to see an evolution in spatial computing. We're going to have computers that can start to understand the world around us, like with self-driving cars. They cannot miss a stop sign, and they can't say oops and get a ticket and tell the police officer sorry. There's just no room for that, and they're going to have to get better, and they are. And then we're going to have immersive BCI experiences, fully brain-controlled virtual worlds. That is what I'm working on currently for the last week. I'm working on our demo where we walk through each of one of the sensors that Galia has, and you control an element in VR with that thing. We say we show a heart that beats and then emanates these like waves underneath it, and we say hold your breath for a little while, and your heart rate will go down, and it controls the heart. We say maybe hyperventilate a little bit, and then your heart rate will go up, and you can see the heart beat faster. And this is just proving how easy it is once you have an integrated system to control virtual reality with this. And then we're also going to see the advent of human augmentation, which is convergence of BCIs and spatial computing and AI to enhance human capabilities. Elon likes to talk a lot about this with his Neuralink implant. But like I said, currently there's other companies that are ahead of Neuralink, and they have like 5 years of data with 10 patients. It's a ton of data, and they're having positive outcomes for these patients. But eventually, people may want implants because they want to do Siri in their head, right? They want to write it's one thing to get information out of the brain, and you're really not getting information out of the brain. You're getting electrical signals. Like, it's so hard to understand what is the human intent from just a few blips of electricity, right? I've got my electrical, I just dropped something. I've got my signal generator here, and if I give you like a 5 hertz triangle wave, what does that mean? Who knows? Very complicated to derive intent from action potentials, but we're getting there. Cool. And here's our extra credit stuff. Look at all of these modalities. Electroencephalography, that's brain waves. EMG, that's muscles. EOG, electrooculography, is eye movements. It's like EMG, but particularly the eyes, because you can put on the outer canthus right here to get this direction. Looks like a XY plot. You put them here to get this way, and then you put one above the eye and one below the eye to get up and down. And you could, apart, well, let me just keep going. That's EOG. Then we have electrodermal activity, also called galvanic skin response. That's like micro sweat. It shows like, is there something you find exciting or scary? And then we have polyplethysmography. I think I said that right. PPG, which is kind of what I have in my Apple Watch. It's a light that shines through the skin to get blood flow, and you can see people's pulse. I think that left off EKG, but PPG is a little more compact. And we have FNIRS, just, functional near red. Oh man, I'm forgetting that one.
Spectroscopy, yeah.
Yeah. It's a big one. I haven't said that out loud in a while. Just been saying FNIRS. And then we also have optical eye tracking. We can put a little camera at the eye and we can see the pupil dilation, which if you calibrate for the screen display or the light that's coming in, because normally when our eyes see, when it's bright outside, our pupils constrict, and whenever it's dark, our pupils get wider to let more or less light in. But if you account for that, you can also see like it's a sign of stress or like engagement, things like that. You can also track people's hands with cameras, and then you, apart from just hand tracking, you can do body position tracking. And the control scheme for the human-computer interaction should fit naturally to streamline the adoption and the user experience. Like with the Control Labs things, they're interested in what, like with optical hand tracking, you need to have a camera pointed, which is usually why they put sensors, cameras like around here, around the bottom, and they're wide-angle lenses so they can see it. But what do you do if you put your hands behind your back and you clasp your hands and you truly do want to interact in XR with an object behind? Well, you're probably not going to have cameras all around your room. That's one way of doing body tracking, but it's just not sustainable. So they put an EMG thing on the hand to get the actual movements of the hand, and then they decode which one are they doing with their hand, and they don't need to track the hand anymore. And so that's and it fits. If you want to grasp something with your hands, use a muscle sensor that's closer to the thing that you're trying to activate. So like the example, picking something up with 2 fingers, a pinch, in VR is best achieved with hand tracking. But if it needs to be out of frame, it's already been proven that you can do that with EMG, and it's resilient to the hand tracking. And there's also a trade-off between augmentation and new UX. So while I said that this control scheme needs to should fit naturally, that doesn't fit with the example of the individual that maybe is doing a defense task and they have to do a manual and they have to repair this plane or their aircraft mechanic or something, and they need both of their hands, but they also need drones that are in the warehouse that if they flinch this way and do this, it's not so intuitive. But this goes back to the neuroplasticity term, that we can learn it if the motivation is there. If they're being told that they can have a robot, like humanoid robot or Spot or who knows what they have access to, can help them and help them achieve their task 10 times faster so that they can achieve their mission objective or something, that they're going to want to do it. And we shouldn't underestimate the power of human resilience. Just hunkering down and saying, I need to do this for myself, or I need to do this for my coworkers, I need to do this for this patient. Let me not use a defense scenario. What if it's a surgeon, right? And they need 5 more sets of arms. I know it's an odd number, right? They need 5 more sets of arms in addition for some new type of surgery that's going to be invented. And that's in addition to all of the nurses and support staff that's normally in an operating room. They know that this surgery has never been attempted before, and that surgeon is going to practice and practice and practice. And they're going to relearn how they should do a link and do a this without closing their eyes so that they can do this for the patient. And that's just where we're headed. So, key takeaways. We've gone over like what is a BCI. We've gone into applications of BCIs. I've spitballed a few. None of these were specific examples. I was just making them up as I went along. So hopefully I did okay. And then spatial computing. It's representing it's a better representation of the digital world and our physical world. And I should have included a slide that we normally share sometimes in official BCI presentations, where you're writing to the brain. All of this sensing comes off of the human, and then through VR, if we want a person with PTSD to hopefully calm down, and we see a high cognitive load and stress, and we know what their favorite music is that calms them, because we've seen their heart rate decrease when we play their favorite music, and we gently fade in that music. In that way, we don't need to have like an electrode in their brain injecting current or stimulating their vagus nerve or whatever that is. We don't need to directly inject electrical current to write to the brain. We have all the inputs that we need. This goes back to how we're made to engage in a spatial world. The best way to memorize things is where they are in space. If you're trying to, memory experts who do memory competitions, they have tricks where they close their eyes and they imagine a virtual room and they place these abstract facts in this virtual room, and it's just how we're wired. So there are potential challenges of integrating BCIs into spatial computing. It's a lot of electricity, it's a lot of wires. We're working on that. Like I said, Galia currently is just one wire just for the display that already exists. Here's just my base Vario Arrow. Here's the one wire that comes off of it that goes to my computer. And it's the same with Galia right now. And then I said open discussion on ethical considerations, future possibilities, and student questions. But maybe that's enough. And I think I've got about 14 minutes for some questions. If anything wasn't super clear, or you'd like more clarification on a certain slide.
I do have a question. Do you think that eventually VR headsets will just replace laptops and PCs as standalone devices?
That's certainly what Apple is betting on with Vision Pro.
Mm-hmm.
But even then, they still baked in a feature that they're on, like you need to type. I don't know if any of y'all have tried to type in VR, but it's not super intuitive. Like a keyboard appears, and even if you were using hand tracking, you would be like this slow doing something in the air. And then if you have VR controllers, I've got my VR controllers right down here. There's so many buttons on here. So many buttons.
Yeah.
And then even here, you're still kind of like pointing at a button and then clicking a trigger. You're like, it's just hunt and peck. And Apple probably foresaw that wasn't good UX. So they have a feature where the person has their MacBook and then they have a normal keyboard, and then they can extend the display to make it bigger. And then they can type on their regular keyboard, and they still also have all the processing power of their MacBook. So that's where we're at today. And I also don't, and the type of work that people are doing in VR isn't so synonymous with, like, let's say people are designing a car. We've seen Vario sells a lot to like car manufacturers. Mm-hmm. And their designers, they're in a mixed reality scenario, and they have a big room, and they have extra tether cords, so that they're still connected to a computer, but with a long cable. And they even have these things draping down from the ceiling so they can walk around. And then they're walking around this digital car, and then they use their hand or their VR controller to say, let's look at this part. They like pull it out, and then they do this and expand it. And that's not how it was done on a laptop, and it's way better for them. But like, why would you paint a 2D image? Why would a typical graphic designer paint a 2D image in VR if it's just a logo and they're using a 2D screen? You know, it needs to fit with what they're doing. So that's why tons of graphic designers are still making logos with a regular computer on a 2D screen, because of the representation fits the work. And in the case of a car manufacturer, that's very much a 3D object. It's so hard to see, and sharing something like the internals of a car engine are kind of hard to share in a PowerPoint presentation. But
Yes,
you can fly. You don't even have to fly them in anymore. Like, ship them a VR headset and sell, please, you need a space this big, and we will do a presentation with you live, and we will show you. And you can do a virtual meeting like that. And that's where some places are headed.
And
So they like,
yeah.
so yeah, will it replace the stuff? It's going to be hard. It's still going to be a place, and our phones are still 2D.
Yeah.
But we've got AR and XR on our phones already, and that's already a use case for very popular games like Pokemon Go.
And how does OpenBCI plan to compete with, for example, companies like Neuralink or Synchron? Because like we are aware that, for example, ECOG is a way more clearer signal. So how does OpenBCI plan to compete with those companies?
I just want to go back to my first slide, which says that these opinions that I'm sharing today are not official views of OpenBCI. So I can answer that from my personal opinion. And my personal opinion is that OpenBCI is not competing with Invasive.
Okay.
They are very much separate at this point. They are competing with themselves, Neuralink. And they may even say that they're not, like, I think, isn't Synchron has the Stentrode?
Yes, they do. Like they use veins and all of that, but still it's an invasive signal. So
Yeah, but that's not even the same approach as a Utah array that's implanted. And they may not even be going, yeah, they may not even be going after the same disease. Like, one could be going after ALS and the other one could be going after motor function and stuff. So one is about restoring memory and function, and the other one is just purely about getting people to move their arm or their legs. So no, to answer that, in my opinion, OpenBCI is not competing with invasive companies. We are non-invasive. So. There's also a big price difference.
yeah, that's true.
It's not a $250,000 surgery.
Yeah.
Or whatever it costs. It probably costs more than $1 million for that surgery.
Yeah, but Galia is still quite expensive, right? And
it is.
Do you think it will, like, the price will drop a little bit?
Well, we again, this is just my personal opinions. It's looking like OpenBCI could be improving the core products again, which means we're going to leverage what we've learned with Galia and the improvements there, and make some more products that are definitely cheaper and more affordable for everyone, like the company has been doing for a long time. But this was meant mostly for businesses and researchers, and it needed to exist. And you have to start somewhere, right?
Right.
Yeah, and then the people who are able to afford this, that's a little bit of what they're paying for. They're paying to be one of the first to get this product that was handmade with care, um, in New York, um, so they can be ahead of whoever they like to be ahead of in whatever field that they're in.
Yeah, I think that it will go through this process. Yeah, like you said, you started with researchers and companies, and I think that is just the start of the process.
Hmm. And we expect it's OpenBCI has been a platform, so you've got to open the platform, you've got to make the hardware, and it can't just be uh, simulated data. It's got to be real data, real studies getting done. We're doing studies internally, uh, and people that we've shipped Dahlia to, they're doing their own studies that we don't know about. So we're just excited to see what everybody can do with it, while continuing to support our core products that help you know people that are just want to get into, like me. I bought OpenBCI gear because I wanted to make high-tech solutions for individuals with autism, and then I just got noticed by OpenBCI, and they took me on as a contractor. I had envisioned a system where uh, kids with autism, they have this thing. It's called stemming, and they like one child. I just remember one child who he would just rock back and forth like that. He wasn't doing it to get attention, which is what most children act out for. Um, is doing it because he had internal tension, and he was not okay. And like with the individual PTSD, you play calming music. What if we could just put a minimally invasive system that these children can take on and take off? The data stays in the classroom on a computer that nobody really has access to, and the system just figures out what color does the room need to be for this child to calm down. And then what's crazy, if you do a multi-user setup with that, and this is like valence and arousal with you want, let's see, I forget which ones. I haven't talked about valence and arousal in a while. You want high arousal and low valence, I think. You want them to like the thing that they're doing with low stress. Um, and then when they do that, like, what would the color be for two individuals? And would it be the same color all day? Probably not. And then the system would just change the color of the room to help the children relax and do their learning. You could do that with music too. So
Okay, thank you. I don't think that we have any questions left, so I think we can end the stream now. Thank you very much for being here today, and thank you for giving us this incredible lecture.
you're welcome. Thank you, everyone. Hope you have a nice rest of your day.